Hello and welcome to APEC Time, a special program of World Insight coming to you from APEC 2018 from Papua New Guinea. I'm Tian Wei. In our program today, we're going to bring you some of the discussions related to how the APEC CEO Summit and the APEC economic leaders are going to discuss and also brainstorm about the future of the global trade as well as peace and stability of the region. But first, let's check out where this meeting is going to be held and how they're going to work. From the blue water to the lush mountainous terrains and the third largest rainforest in the world, Papua New Guinea, where we are right now, is certainly one of those places to visit for fun and relaxation. However, when it comes to holding such a huge international event like the Asia-Pacific Economic Leaders Meeting and the APEC CEO Summit, this country is certainly facing quite some challenges. In order to make it a success, it's been soliciting ideas from all over the world as to how to do it. And this is it. We are on a cruise ship called the Pacific Explorer. More than 2,000 guests can be hosted at the same time on this cruise ship. This is boarding at the harbor of the capital city. A hard look at the reality is the thing that many attending the APEC CEO Summit and the Asia-Pacific Economic Leaders Meeting have to do. With the rise of protectionism and the debate about globalization, will this region, Asia-Pacific, one of the most vibrant in the world, be able to figure out how to support free trade and be able to make sure it's going to be inclusive growth? But will conversation really save the world? Well, that we'll see in those meeting rooms. Leaders are going to speak at this podium, ranging from Chinese President Xi Jinping to the Vice President Mike Pence of the United States. They might have very different opinions about how things could be done, but one thing is very clear, that this is the place where those voices and opinions are going to be heard loud and clear. And the good news is CGTN is here as one of the official media partners. We have a special studio set up right outside the meeting room. It is here in which we are going to interview the leaders coming from the business circle as well as those state leaders that are coming to the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting. As you can see, the lights, cameras, and action. But if you look around us, our colleagues are hard at work. Hi, you guys. Hi. Hello. But at the end of the day, it is going to be here, in which we're going to bring you the live broadcast of the speech given by Chinese President Xi Jinping, as well as exclusive interviews we will get to you with business and political leaders, only on CGTN. To chart a common future, that is a goal designated for this year's APEC CEO Summit and the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting. But will the business and political leaders be fulfilling their responsibilities? I asked that question to Rebecca Santamaria, who is the Executive Director Designate for APEC. And she talked to me right before she headed down for Port Moresby. For more on the APEC meeting this year, we are joined in Kuala Lumpur by Dr. Rebecca Santamaria, the Executive Director Designate for APEC, Senior Policy Director, Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. Rebecca, what a pleasure to see you.
Yes, thank you for inviting me.
It's our great pleasure. Rebecca, help us to understand the heavy agenda for this year's APEC. Obviously, there are a lot of different opinions regarding where the future is for trade and certainly for APEC as well.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen this year, there will be more intense discussion on what we have achieved through the BOGO goals. The deadline for the BOGO goals is 2020. So we're working towards ensuring that we meet the targets that we set for ourselves, that APEC member economies set for themselves, to achieve all the free and open trade by 2020. So a lot of work is being done. There's some evaluations also done. We're not far off the target, and even as we're looking at our achievements, APEC member economies are also looking to the future. So the chair of APEC going forward, which is Chile next year, and then Malaysia subsequently, they will be working very closely with the business community, the APEC Business Advisory Council, as well as the member economies, the governments of the member economies, to really chart the course for the next few years.
Well, of course, the goal for 2020 is a grand goal. As you said, we're not that far away from there, but if you look around, not just APEC itself, but what's happening in the rest of the world, the rise of protectionism and the debate of globalization, as a result of that, where trade is going, how some of the biggest trading powers are dealing with one another and looking at the global mechanism, those are huge questions. Will APEC this time be able to escape those questions?
I don't think they can escape those questions. Those questions, those issues are on the table, and the ministers, the officials, the ministers, and the leaders will be discussing it. I don't think we can sidestep those issues. That's the reality of what's happening in the global environment. But to be sure, there is will to see through the goals that we set for ourselves, to look at how APEC supports the multilateral trading system. APEC has always been there to support the multilateral trading system. And to some extent, we were like pathfinders for some of the initiatives. You know, if you look at what we've done for the trade facilitation, all APEC member states, member economies rather, are signatories to the World Trade Organization's Trade Facilitation Agreement. And likewise, we set ourselves the goal to reduce, to improve market access for environmental goods. That started through the APEC process and is now with the WTO. So we provide that sort of initiative, the push for and support for the multilateral trading system, and that will continue. Sorry, yes?
But, you know, if you say, Rebecca, that APEC has been instrumental in pushing forward some of the new mechanisms and ways of dealing with problems, such as what has been done over the past few decades in dealing with the issues related to WTO. Rebecca, would this be possible that APEC this time, the economies, right before the G20 summit between China and the United States, be able to help the two largest economies in the world to streamline some of the most important opinions regarding trade to pave the way for the Leaders Summit? And after all, there is a Leaders Summit among the APEC leaders as well. Will they be able to bring any new momentum to the real solutions, Rebecca?
Yeah, I see the challenge for the senior officials as they meet and try to find a bridge across these very, very challenging issues. It's not going to be a walk in the park for the officials when they meet this time, and likewise when the ministers meet, they're going to have to confront these very tough issues. We saw some of that in the East Asia Summit at ASEAN level, how, you know, the negotiated joint statement. I expect that, you know, there will be those challenges even as the APEC officials, ministers, and then leaders meet. It's not going to be easy, but there is, you know, you have 21 economies who are determined to send a very important message about the importance of global trade. And I think that should be the message that should be carried throughout the process.
Rebecca, there are very interesting mechanisms within the APEC economies, particularly during the summit this time, and also over the past years of the summits, that there are individually initiated agreement, and there are also collectively initiated agreement. So does that give us a lot of leeway to deal with some of the current problems and at least bring some consensus and common voices?
It works in so many ways. You can manage global issues on so many levels, whether it is bilaterally and then gaining momentum and getting more like-minded countries and economies to join in, and to take it at a very high level. So it really boils down to how the officials see this process continuing. It is important that they keep the channels of communication open, looking at all the options and pushing forward an agenda, a global trade agenda that benefits, that is inclusive. And to borrow the phrase of President Xi, that leads to shared prosperity. I think that is so important. If folks focus on the goal, the end game, what's the end game? We're all looking to better ourselves, to have more inclusive growth, sustainable growth. Then if that's the goal, we should be able to work together, not just at the officials level, but also with the business community. And in this context, then, the initiatives, the push that is coming, and the support that's coming from the APEC Business Advisory Council will be so important. They have formulated their agenda, which they will want to take up with the ministers and with the leaders. And at the end of the day, it's the business that will make the difference.
Well, when you talk about the end game, Rebecca, we have to bear in mind sometimes even the end game, the design of the end game, the purpose of the end game could be different. I mean, if you heard about the famous quote, somebody first, if you have heard about the quote, like some of the countries' interest first, they also have other versions of the end game, which is a win-win, mutual respect. I mean, there are different kind of versions of end game when it comes to rhetorics, but what exactly will be the end game? Isn't that the biggest test for the APEC economy this time?
Yes, I think going in this time, everybody is conscious of what the challenges are, what the expectations are. I cannot imagine that we come out with nothing to tell the world. It is important for APEC to stay relevant, to contribute to the process, and I'm sure the officials, the ministers and the leaders are well aware of what they're up against. And that's why, for me, the support and the initiatives that are coming through from the business community is so important. It is a reality check for us. Officials, ministers, leaders can get stuck at a very high level, have a high level of discussion. But at the end of the day, when the rubber meets the road, it is the business community. And in this context, then I would surely see, or we would surely see the Business Advisory Council playing a much bigger role to ensure, to make sure that we bridge those gaps. At the end of the day, we have to put politics aside, focus on economics, focus on inclusive, sustainable growth, focus on shared prosperity. I think that's what's important. It is not about any individual country pushing its agenda.
Talking about the shared future, Rebecca, I'm sure as an expert about trade and economic growth, you are researching on a daily basis even about the global supply chain change as a result of the current debate. Rebecca, if you look at the economies of the APEC, you have the most developed countries, you also have emerging economies as well as developing economies. ASEAN, for example, many of those are included in the third camp and the second camp. So, Rebecca, help us to understand this. How will this be able to impact, from your perspective, global supply chain and therefore the economic development stage and realities of all our economies within APEC, which is the most vibrant trade bloc or the most vibrant countries, entities so far in the world?
Yep, I agree with you. In APEC, you have some of the most dynamic economies with very credible, very commendable rates of growth. But the important thing here is to ensure that in all the initiatives, in all the work that we're doing, we make sure that we are the rising tide, and the rising tide, you raise everyone else. So it is that philosophy that we go in to ensure that you don't leave any country behind, or when any initiative that you take results in benefits across the board. And when you talk of global supply chains, that's an important message to send. We are so interconnected. Over the years, our value chains have grown so interconnected. So if any part of that value chain is disrupted, it impacts not just one or two economies, but subsequent economies, all the economies that are linked. And that's why the whole conversation around protectionism and value chains, supply chains, is so important at this stage. When we're making decisions on global trade, we have to consider the impact, the global impact of any decision that is taken.
At the recent wrapped up CIIE, the first ever China Import Expo, Rebecca, you were there. You were even hosting a panel at the Hongqiao International Economic Forum, in which there is Jack Ma. There's also Bill Gates. So you heard from Jack Ma, the trade war between China and the United States is the most stupid thing, in his words. And you also heard from Bill Gates, who said he's totally for free trade. That is an absolute answer. So when you have entrepreneurs, business people, whether from emerging economies or from developed countries, are saying the same message, whether that message will be heard by the political leaders, I think that is going to be one of the biggest questions. APEC is going to be responsible this time.
Absolutely, Jen. That's why I say that the role of the APEC Business Advisory Council is so important. They bring to the table the voice of the business community. In the CIIE and in the forum, we heard voices from two parties, one from China and one from the US, talking about the importance of keeping communications alive and seamless. The trade should be seamless and growing. Governments shouldn't be putting barriers to business, to trade. And in my interventions at the forum, I said that that's the role of government. The role of government is to facilitate business. We cannot be putting up barriers. Businesses have it difficult as is. So when we make it, we be bringing new regulations, new ways of looking at things which create barriers to business, then we're not really helping. And so for me, it's so important that government realizes, that all governments realize their role in this whole, in the whole global trade conversation, that ours is to facilitate trade and business and investment. At the end of the day, when trade grows, investment continues, everybody benefits. That's the importance of keeping markets open.
But Rebecca, some economies and some administrations suggested that they are only using quote-unquote a trade war as a strategy or as a negotiating tool in order to reach better ground for the so-called what they consider as free trade. But of course, others point out there's likely to be enormous amount of loss, business loss, benefits loss, losses to the consumers as a result of so-called skills of negotiation. Rebecca, how do you see these arguments?
To a large extent, it's posturing, and it's just a lot of rhetoric, a lot of ego coming to the fore. I don't think it is what the business community wants. At the end of the day, if you halt business, if you put barriers to business, you drag down not just one economy, you drag down global trade because of the interconnectedness in today's global trading system. So it is so important that we try and send this message loudly, and I look forward to hearing the ministers send this message loudly that we need to keep markets open. We need to create seamless trading environment, for a seamless flow of goods, services, and investment. That is so important at a time like this. At some point, reality must bite, and that will come from us engaging more with the business community and forgetting the posturing. Posturing doesn't work for any of us at the end of the day. And there will be no winners in such an environment.
Right. Rebecca, as you may know, APEC has been, doing brainstorming over the years to talk about the Asia-Pacific area for free trade. That seems to be one of the best end goals for the Asia-Pacific economies. How far are we from there when you have a medium level of end goal by 2020? But where is the Asia-Pacific area for free trade, which is likely to bring huge momentum to the world trade?
The free trade area for the Asia Pacific is an initiative that's on the table, and a lot of discussion. I mean, it's a very challenging free trade agreement to negotiate, involving 21 economies. So there is work that's already being done, and we'll have to really spend time in the nuts and bolts, preparing the ground before even the negotiations begin. So the study has been done. And I'm sure that when the officials meet in the coming years, they will be ironing out the details, because this would be very, very momentous. If 21 economies can get together and create this interconnected world of free trade in goods, services, and investment. The closest we have to that today is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement that's being negotiated with ASEAN plus her six dialogue partners. And even there, you see the process. There is political will, but it is when you get down to the nitty-gritties, the nuts and bolts, that you can get you encounter some challenges.
Right.
So these are opportunities going forward. Building blocks. We've always said that RCEP and the TPP, now the CPTPP, will be building blocks towards the FTAP. And I think having seen the progress in the CPTPP, we've seen some progress being made in the RCEP. There is political will to see conclusion to that agreement. And together with the work that we've done on the FTAP, one would think that we have the basis to begin the process of a much larger FTA for the region.
Right. Rebecca, before we go, you are the Executive Director Designate for APEC, and you are going to your office in Singapore coming year. Obviously, you are coming to the office of APEC at some of the most challenging time. Rebecca, I'm sure your friends and colleagues are asking you, my dear, are you ready for that?
I'm always up to a challenge. When I was the Secretary General of MITI, I took over at a time when there were a lot of controversial issues on our table. But I believe that it's a matter of engaging the different parties, having conversations, keeping lines of communication open. Those things help. And my years of experience in dealing with ASEAN and ASEAN dialogue partners in various agreements and negotiations, I think I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but definitely I bring that experience to the table in my new job. Yeah.
Final question. As someone who's been researching about APEC, about ASEAN, about East Asia, and as someone who is likely to be in the office to coordinate all the policies and different parties next year, what do you think at least should be achievements for this year in order to make things happen and onto the right path?
The thing with APEC is that it is building on the previous year's work, and it is really putting together a package that will set the stage for the next level. And I think they've done that this year. They've looked at creating more dynamism in the region, questions about dealing with the issues of protectionism. Those will definitely be on the table, and perhaps some level of consensus on how to deal with those challenges. I know that APEC, the APEC Business Advisory Council has put together some of their wish lists that they would like the leaders to discuss with them, and those things are not far and not different from what we've been talking about in terms of keeping markets open, having more flexible and more business friendly and investment friendly rules and regulations in the region, building towards that, and a more integrated Asia Pacific region. So we can hope to see some fairly good results in spite of the challenges that we're going through.
Dr. Rebecca Santamaria, the Executive Director Designate for APEC, congratulations and thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you at the APEC. The interactions between business leader and political leader is one of the most important features of APEC every year, and this time it's no exception. It is well understood that business leaders from around the world have already come up with their own suggestions to the political leaders and looking forward to the answer from the other party. And that's what the Executive Director of ABAC, the APEC Business Advisory Council, told me right before the APEC CEO Summit. Let's listen in. Ken, what a pleasure to see you here in Papua New Guinea.
Very nice to be here. Lovely to see you.
The work this time is going to be very challenging compared to the beautiful weather we have over there.
We're in challenging times, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to meet challenges, to put our thoughts into some big issues and get some resolution. But we've met regularly over the year, and we've had many meetings. The messages to leaders are, we have to deal with this threat of protectionism. We have to roll it back, and we've progressed too far in international relationships over the post-war period on believing in open markets and investment flow. That's what APEC is about. The Bogai goals are about that. And when we start to reverse that, we're turning our backs on what ABAC is about, APEC and ABAC is about. And the business community is really concerned that the pressures of protectionism that are rising for different reasons in different parts of the world, but globally they are rising. We've got to deal with it. We've got to say, look, there is a system of government, international government. There are international rules of the game. There is a WTO, and we've spent a lot of time building these institutions, and we've got to respect them. We've got to work with them, and when they're under threat, we have to defend them, and we've got to find ways of doing that well.
That is the key, isn't it? We've got to find ways to do that well before anything too devastating happens. But what are likely to be the ways? I mean, you've been talking to business leaders coming from various delegations within the APEC framework. Tell us, what are some of the things that people are playing with right now?
The first thing is to regain confidence in what I've just been saying, in the international order for economic growth and development, and in openness in markets. We need to get people back again onto that track, and that's a job for governments and business. And we need to explain to our communities what is the benefit of globalization. Why has it? The fact is, it's created many jobs. It's created increased living standards. It's reduced poverty across the globe, and there have been massive benefits. But there is something of a jaundiced view now occurring, that the spread of benefits have not trickled down far enough. Wages have stagnated across many major economies, and the working men and women are not finding the benefits that should come. A lot of it is looking at the WTO and the trading systems that we have, looking at new regimes that will open markets again. The ASEP and the FTAP. These are the new visions we have, that we've got to keep progressing thinking on open markets. Simply put, that's what we're about. But it's not that alone. What I've been talking about with communities being jaundiced about all of this is this lack of inclusiveness.
Right.
And in Papua New Guinea's year and in the last few years of APEC, inclusiveness is a concept we're developing. How do we bring in more people to benefit from this process of international openness and market development? And there are ways of doing it. For example, it is a question of why are wages stagnating across the region, across the Asia-Pacific region? How do we address that? How do governments and business address that? How do we raise, and the answer to that is increased productivity and growth, and more flexibility in labour markets, more flexibility and more mobility. The more reforms we can make on structural matters to open markets, to open competition, to get the threat of price competition coming through is a great process, and that's the key to doing a lot of this work. Second point is with the institutions themselves, the WTO. There are concerns. The United States has raised concerns about the WTO and the judicial system, the system of in the WTO to deal with disputes. We need to look at that. Why is that one major economy dissatisfied with that dispute system? Find ways to remedy the system within the processes of the WTO, not outside it. Not saying we can't deal with the WTO, but how do we deal with it within the WTO? Now those are big challenges, and I think the third big, I've mentioned two. The third one is really we're facing this benefit of digitalization and innovation. That's sweeping the world, and we see ABAC and APEC particularly. We see this as a really important lever into inclusiveness. Right. How do we get broadband, internet, available to every citizen on this planet? How do we do that? It's simple. In a technical sense, it can be done, but we have to get the infrastructure in place. We have to have the vision of the regulatory environment to allow it to happen, to allow the free flow of information across borders, and all of that requires new thinking and adapting technology to serve people.
Many of the points you talk about can certainly have been well debated already, but the question is that the global debate, if not global trade conflict, is developing so fast that it does not even allow reasonable discussions anymore. People tend to be, or countries tend to be, very emotional.
Yes, I agree with that.
And therefore, how much do you think the reasonable discussions within the rooms right behind us are likely really getting into the global agenda?
We can't walk away from talking. We have to do it. We have to. Okay, it's getting people back to the table to talk in ways in which we can reasonably deal with issues. Walking away from the table, not having discussion is a disaster. You're in a sense you're blessing protectionism, because that's the way it will go if we don't talk about it. If we don't, as I said earlier, we are looking at FTAP, Free Trade Area Asia Pacific. North Asia is looking at RCEP. We have to project these things. We have to move on them. People have got to make decisions to make them work, and that's within our capacity.
Ken, as you may know, for those in politics, there might be a very apparent big divide between them and among them about where trade should go. But do you notice parallel phenomena within the business community, or it's actually exactly the opposite?
I got to say, we've looked at this. I've been observing this year, drafting the report that ABAC will be presenting to its leaders.
Yes.
A lot of us have been working on this. And the words we've put forward have been accepted totally by the ABAC business community. The 21 economists, business people here have accepted that.
You mean they are from developed economies, or from
Yes,
developing
yes.
economies, they are from the least developed
Yes,
economies?
they're from, yeah.
They range from different
They're
sectors?
all the spectre of APEC,
I see.
all represented by APEC, yes. The business community has said, look, we're in dangerous waters, we've got to move and get our act together. It's what we're saying to leaders, and we've got to do that.
Do the business communities usually can, from your experience, I mean, you've been working with ABAC for a long time, be able to have strong persuasive power over the years, this time particularly?
I think they will find it hard to govern well. These are important messages from people who employ people, who make the difference between a developing economy, a developed economy, a growth path of in high digits. Business people do that, and that's what's got to impress, hopefully, on leaders. And I hope they take that message.
Well, they think about the election cycles.
Yes, I know.
4 years.
Yes.
The most, 8 years.
Well, I agree with that. But the election cycles, really, you can look at it in terms of creating a sense of optimism and futuristic development and progress, or that this is all too difficult and I'm going to go into protectionist mode. Well, you make choices between those two things, and good political leaders have got to press the buttons to make the right choices on that.
You see, trade conflicts, some even term it as trade wars, going on among some of the major economies in this region, in the Asia-Pacific region, and as a result in the world as well. To you, who has been researching about APEC and serving ABAC for the past few decades, how would you assess that? Is it about geopolitics? Is it about how wealth is going to be shared for the future? Is it about ideology? Is it about political systems? What is it about?
I don't think it's. I don't see ideology as the crib. We have different governance structures within APEC. The world has many different governance structures, and ideology obviously is a driver of governance structures. So I have different ones. We can live with all that. It's the rules of the game that we create when we relate to each other, and we do that in a harmonious way, like through trade agreements or WTO or plurilateral agreements or multilateral agreements. It's governments coming together and agreeing there is a common good to do something to open markets. Basically, that's what it's about. I don't think it's not an ideological thing. The issue of rising nationalism, which I think is at the back of your question, comes from for many reasons, and whether that's ideology or the working out of politics is a good question. But the central point I think we stand for in APEC and ABAC is that what we've developed is worth a lot, and don't move away from it. It's central to our future. Just going to a point you made about sharing the benefit, I was going to add to this the point of digitalization and innovation through the internet and systems. This is a key. This is a key for Papua New Guinea particularly. We have to have the ability, the capacity, we'll soon have it, to have highest quality technology available. The question is access to it and the distribution of it and the pricing of it, so that people in villages across this country can benefit from it, can use it. Now, that takes some decisions by the government to allow that to happen. in a practical sense, in a business sense, it can all happen. It's a political judgment call now. How do we make it happen? Do we make it happen? And do we change our education systems to facilitate more access, more training for people, upgrading skills and so on? These are very simple things.
Human capital,
yeah, absolutely. These are things within the capacity of each government in APEC to do.
And the question is whether they have done it or not.
Well, some have. Some are doing it. Some are. We're on a road. We're in different stages of this. Here we need, in Papua New Guinea, I think the Prime Minister and others realize this need is a very urgent one. And you see now a drive for startups, for innovators, incubators within the MSME sector in Papua New Guinea, all on this drive to get spreading the use of technology.
With that, we're coming to the end of this special edition of World Insight, coming to you from Papua New Guinea on the 2018 APEC Economic Leaders Meeting. In the next few days, we're going to bring you all the latest information as well as exclusive interviews about where this region is heading for with our special program, APEC Time. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of my team here in Papua New Guinea and back in Beijing. Thanks for being with us, and bye for now.